So we were talking about our different sampling techniques yesterday. And so we are looking at a couple examples. We ended one where we were looking at the random numbers on our calculator and getting our stratified sample. This one says, a quality control engineer wants to obtain a systematic sample of 25 bottles coming off a filling machine to verify the machine is working properly. So how could we do that? What is systematic? What does that mean?
Something.
Yeah. So like you have this system for it, you take every third bottle or every sixth bottle. Why would that be a good approach instead of just taking like 5 bottles from the beginning?
Because then you have the beginning, middle, and end.
Okay. Is it possible that as the day goes on, the machine becomes less accurate or something like that? As it heats up, maybe it's not filling properly. So you want to take samples throughout, not just all in one point. So how might I do it? Okay, so you could survey every 5th bottle. Do you have to start with the first one? Could I say, I'm going to start with bottle 5 or bottle 7 and take every 5th bottle after that? Sure. So there's no rule that says you have to start at 1. So let's say starting at let's say bottle 3 until you get a sample of 25. So that's systematic. It's always taking every so many. There's a pattern to it. If you know how big your sample size, we didn't here, but if I knew that I produced 100 bottles a day, then you could take 100 divided by 25 to figure out how often you should pull one to make sure that you do get a good spread throughout the day, so you don't have to just arbitrarily pick it. All right, what about this one? A school administrator wants to obtain a sample of students in order to conduct a survey. How could this be done using a cluster sample? What is a cluster? A bunch of things. So remember, yes, you break everybody into a group, and then you pick certain groups and take everybody in those groups. So what could our clusters be? Okay. So we could separate students by grade. It didn't say how many we want, but let's say pick, well, you would have to take the entire grade. So let's say pick 2 grades and survey all students in those grades. Remember when we did like 10 from each, that's stratified. You broke them into your grades, but instead of taking that entire group, you took a few from each group. All right. So we kind of, just a review from yesterday, we talked about this, your simple random, you have everybody take a few randomly, like our random number generator. Stratified, we break everybody into a group, everybody belongs somewhere, we take a few randomly from each of those groups. Systematic, we take every 3rd or 5th or 7th or whatever. Cluster, you break everybody into a group and then you take the entire group from it. The other ones, what was convenience sampling? Whatever's easy. Is that ever going to be a good option? No, it is always going to have bias in it. It's really never a good choice. And what was multi-stage? When we had a combination of techniques. Good. I was just kind of summarizing what we did yesterday right there. So now we're ready to talk about bias on our definition stage. So under our chart on the definition stage. If our sample does not really represent the entire population we are worried about, then we are looking at There's really three different ways that we can get bias in our sample. There's sampling, non-response, and response bias. So, for your definition of bias, you can just say the results are not representative of the population. That's the definition of bias. So these, you can probably guess what they mean. What do you think sampling bias means? What caused the bias? Our sample. We had a bad sample for some reason. Maybe it's because we took a convenience sample. Maybe it was a cluster sample. Maybe we just didn't really think it through. For some reason, our sample doesn't represent the whole population. What do you think a non-response bias would be? They don't answer. Maybe they don't answer at all. Because, you know, think about every time you go to the doctor, then they call you and ask if you would take a survey on your doctor's visit. Do you usually do that? No. When would you take the survey? Yeah, you might do it right there at the doctor's office, or usually the only time I want to take them is if I'm mad about something, right? Do you guys ever feel that way? The only time you want to give them your feedback is if you're mad and you want them to know you're mad. So all those people that don't respond creates a non-response bias, and the group that we get is different than the whole population. Response bias, people respond, but maybe not accurately. That could be because they don't understand your question. You know, you throw in, think of all those true-false questions where there's a random not in there trying to trick you. You misread the question, you don't understand it. Or maybe you respond, but you just don't want to tell the truth. Like, I'm like, David, do you think I'm a good teacher? Are you going to be like, no, you're terrible, worst teacher I've ever had? Like, no, you're not going to want to say that to my face. So you might respond, but may not be honest in how you feel. So those are the situations where we get bias. Non-response is when the people that don't respond have an opinion. Response is when they answer the survey but doesn't reflect their true feelings. And I did list a few of those there. So interviewer error, maybe I'm asking you a question but I'm kind of phrasing it so that you answer a certain way, so that could be an issue. Misrepresented, maybe I'm writing down your answers and I just write it down wrong. The wording of the questions, if you don't understand how it's read, the order of the questions can make a difference sometimes. You know, have you ever had those questions where it's like strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree, and you fill the first few out and then 50 questions later you're like, whatever, I don't care anymore, everything's neutral. That can be an issue. If it's a really long survey, the longer it goes on, people are less likely to take the time to read it. So those are all things, they answered it, but those answers may not really mean anything. The last thing I want to talk about is error that has to do with sampling. Non-sampling errors means we had a good sample, but somehow we have a mistake. So that's usually from how we recorded our results. Maybe we made a mistake when we wrote those numbers down. Sampling error means it's that we got bad data because we had a bad sample to begin